Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a step back in time to explore an ancient, super dramatic story that honestly feels surprisingly relevant to modern-day Wall Street. We're looking at the historical and religious accounts of Prophet Shuaib and the corrupt merchants of Madyan.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What actually happens when an entire society's wealth is built completely on deceit? It's a massive moral conflict, right? One that totally transcends time. According to the texts we're examining today, this isn't just some story about a few shady business deals. No, it's about the very fabric of a community unraveling when the relentless pursuit of wealth just completely overshadows basic human decency. The stakes established here, they literally could not be higher.
But to really grasp this conflict, we first have to understand the setting. We're looking at a group the texts call the Ashab al-Aika, which translates to the companions of the wood. This refers to the people of Madyan. Geographically, this whole region fell within what we'd now call Greater Syria. And here's the ironic part. For a people who the texts describe as, frankly, morally bankrupt, they lived in an absolute lush paradise. Surrounded by these dense, beautiful forests, the Madyanites actually rejected monotheism. Instead, the sources report they worshipped the very woodlands and nature gods around them.
Part 1. The Corrupt City of Madyan.
So let's break down the everyday corruption of these merchants. Because their economic prosperity wasn't just, slightly unethical. It was systematically fraudulent from top to bottom. As outlined in our sources, they regularly and knowingly sold defective goods to totally unsuspecting buyers. They used short measures and rigged weights. It's kind of like the ancient equivalent of shrinkflation or just skimming right off the top. They systematically deprived people of what they were owed on a daily basis. So this wasn't just the action of a few rogue individuals. Complete and utter deceit was basically the foundational business model of Madyan.
And their greed didn't just stop at the local market stalls. Madyan actually weaponized its prime location on these ancient trade routes. Instead of, facilitating fair trade, they acted more like ancient mobsters. They were feared for ambushing passing caravans and demanding these exorbitant extortion fees literally just for safe passage to their town. They just sit right on the paths, threatening travelers. So their greed escalated from just bad measurements into outright physical intimidation.
Part 2. Prophet Shuaib's mission.
According to the Quranic sources, Allah appointed a prophet from right within their very own community to guide them back to righteousness, a man named Shuaib. He was absolutely resolute in his mission to bring them into the fold of Islam. In Surah Ash-Shu'ara, he explicitly tells his people, quote, "Fill up the measure and do not diminish the goods of people, weigh with an even balance, and do not go about creating mischief in the land." So the crucial point here is how deeply his religious message was tied to demanding economic justice. He wasn't just asking them to rethink their theology, he was demanding they completely overhaul their corrupt economic system.
Part 3. The Disbeliever's Mockery.
We see a really stark contrast here that gets right to the absolute heart of the conflict. On one side, Shuaib makes this selfless plea, asking for zero reward, literally just wanting to put things right as far as he can. He's relying on clear evidence. But on the other side, the chiefs of Madyan shoot back with this incredibly sarcastic retort from Surah Al-Hud. They say, "Does your prayer enjoin upon you that we should give up using our wealth as we please?" And this brilliantly illustrates the total disconnect between the two sides. Shuaib comes in with these pure intentions for societal reform, while the Madyanites just respond with arrogant, self-centered greed. To them, his call to ethics was just an offensive restriction on their financial freedom.
Now, Shuaib was a man of real wisdom. To try and awaken their conscience, he laid out a very clear historical pattern of destruction. He pointed directly to previous generations who had defied divine guidance. The people of Noah, the people of Hud, the people of Salah, and the people of Lot. He even reminded them that the destroyed land of Lot really wasn't that far from them. He's essentially treating this history as a ticking clock from Madyan, issuing this severe warning that unchecked corruption historically leads straight to divine intervention.
But did this timeline of destruction give them even a moment's pause? Not at all. The Midianites simply scoffed at him, completely blinded by their deep-seated corruption. They resorted to these aggressive ad hominem attacks. They called Shuaib bewitched and an utter liar. They even went as far as threatening him with physical violence, saying they would have surely stoned him if it wasn't for the awe they held for his family. They basically openly admitted they just saw him as weak and lacking the physical strength to overpower them.
Part 4. The Chief's Ultimatum.
At this point, the chiefs of Madyan were absolutely furious. They clearly understood the risks, and they were terrified of losing their prestige and their authority if Shuaib's message just continued to spread unchallenged. So they delivered this absolute unyielding threat. They said, "O Shuaib, we shall certainly banish you and your companions in faith from our town, or else you shall return to our faith." It was a complete no-nonsense ultimatum.
And, well, they actually acted on it. Fearing his growing influence, the leaders explicitly targeted the believers. They withheld the belongings of Shuaib and his followers, and then they drove them completely out of Madyan. Shuaib, who was completely steadfast in his beliefs, obviously refused to fabricate a lie against Allah by returning to their corrupt faith. Instead, he simply prayed, putting his trust entirely in Allah to judge rightly between them.
Part 5. The Day of Gloom.
The Quranic texts describe the impending punishment for Madyan as the torment of the canopy. This was a devastating day of divine retribution specifically targeted at those who defiantly rejected guidance and just fiercely persisted in their deceit. It's presented as this highly mysterious and truly terrifying event meant to serve as the ultimate, inescapable consequence for their unwavering fraud. According to classical commentaries like the Tafsir Mariful Quran, let's move to and see exactly how this builds. Because the catastrophe unfolded in 4 agonizing steps. First, this extreme, suffocating heat descends on the people, completely driving them from their homes, like they couldn't find comfort inside or out. Second, they spot this massive dark cloud over a nearby forest, which offers what feels like a cool, relieving breeze. Third, utterly distressed by the sheer heat, the entire population basically runs to take shelter together under this very cloud. And fourth, the trap springs. Once everyone is gathered, a shocking catastrophe, described by some commentators as a continuous storm with violent thunderbolts, seizes them all as they remain prostrate in their dwellings. The textual resolution here is absolute. It says, "Those who rejected Shuaib were wiped out as if they had never lived there. Those who rejected Shuaib were the true losers." All their accumulated wealth, all those ambushed caravans, all their short-weighted scales, they meant absolutely nothing. In the end, the source texts depict that their mockery and their systematic fraud led directly to their total, undeniable, historical erasure.
Which brings us to our final thought. Knowing the terrifying fate of Madyan as detailed in these ancient texts, what is the ultimate cost of unchecked corporate greed and societal corruption today? These historical accounts are deliberately designed to make us reflect. While the setting is obviously ancient, the core human failing here, sacrificing ethics for profit and just dismissing calls for justice, feels incredibly relevant to our modern world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive gave you something powerful to think about.